श्रवस्तमं ज्येष्ठराजं ब्रह्मणां ब्रह्मणस्पतान शृण्वन्नोतिभिः सीदसादनं महागणपतये नमः. Welcome. I think somebody is raising their hand. Pavani ji, if you want to just type a message on the chat. Yeah. So welcome back. We'll take up a few questions. I think there yesterday's session had some important verses that have a lot of scope for discussion. I'll take up a few questions, whatever was sent to me. So Professor Vedavyas sent me a message. He has raised two very, very interesting questions, very important questions. One is both of these are regard to the verse on Swadharma. Why does Krishna say Vigunaha with respect to Swadharma? What does he mean by Swadharma having no guna? Now, Vigunaha in this case does not mean no guna. What he's trying to say is that although one may do your Swadharma in a subpar manner, although it may not be as glamorous, as exciting as somebody else's dharma, even then it is better to stick to your innate nature. So that is the intention of saying Shreyan Swadharmo Vigunaha. Even though the Swadharma may be subpar, even though you don't excel at it, even though you are doing it in a let's say not so optimum manner, it is better than excelling in paradharma. You may be excellent in paradharma, but it is not sustainable, because if you are if it is something perfectly aligned to your nature and you're doing very well, it is sustainable, definitely. Whereas when he says excelling in another's dharma, doing some other dharma well, it automatically has the undertone of lack of sustainability. It is not sustainable to do some. When we say other, so here there is no specification. What does the mean? What is Swadharma? What is Paradharma? This is something that you have to figure it out. So therefore, because Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita nowhere tries to give specifications, whether it is with regard to varna, with regard to ashrama, with regard to food habits, with regard to any lifestyle things. He doesn't give specific instruction that 7 a.m. you should have breakfast, 8 p.m. you should have dinner, you should have only this some bisi bede bath. He doesn't give any specific instruction. He gives general instructions from which we can derive what is specifically useful to us, right? So what he's saying is, even if the Swadharma is less glamorous and you are still not so competent in that, it is better to sustain, because that is truly who you are. Okay. Then the next question which he has asked, again, very important question. He says some people seem to interpret Swadharma as the practices of the Varna in which they are born into. If one is born as a Brahmana, then those rituals and those rites are his Swadharma. If somebody is born as a Kshatriya, then fighting and this thing are his Swadharma, and so on. Now, that is not Swadharma, because when we looked at dharma, you remember, we had something called as Samanya or Sadharana Dharma, which applied to everybody. The entire human race, it applies. Fortitude and honesty and not coveting others' possessions and being, having a nature of forgiveness and things like that. It applies to everybody. Then we had Vishesha Dharma, which means based on your ashrama, based on your varna, based on desha kala distinctions, we have specific rules and regulations, right? So if you are going to a particular club in Bangalore or Bombay or Calcutta, which is a British era club, you're expected to wear a shirt with a collar. Probably it's similar in some of the clubs in the UK, in the US as well. Now, why is it there? It may not have any logic or reason or whatever it is, but you have to wear either a t-shirt with a collar or a shirt with a collar. Otherwise, they won't let you inside. Now, if you are so hell-bent on going to the club, you follow the regulations of it, or you don't go to the club, right? Similarly, every place, you can't wear your shoes inside a temple. No, I will wear shoes. Then don't go to temple. Go to the mall. Go somewhere else, wherever shoes are allowed. Similarly, in many houses in India, we don't wear shoes inside. So we will request the guests to leave the shoes outside. So like that, there are restrictions based on place and time. There are restrictions based on, limitations or frameworks based on the varna, based on the ashrama, and so on. Then we have this thing which is universally applicable dharma. Then we have a dharma which is applicable specially to different groups. When you already have something called ashrama dharma, varna dharma, then why is there a need for swadharma also to include varna? You should adhere to certain framework of varna is already there. So therefore, I think Dr. Sri Krishna and me, we don't think that Swadharma has anything to do with Varna or Ashrama or any of these things, because there's already a specific place given to that. We must understand Swadharma as something which is most natural to the individual. So in individual, when it comes to the individual, there are some innate qualities of the person which are untutored aspect of the personality. There are some interests that the person develops. Then there are certain kind of friendships and relationships and groups that the individual will join, which will influence his or her thought process. The same interest level, the same swadharma, when the person is placed under different circumstances, they may take different paths. So the swadharma should not be seen as something which is a static entity. It is a dynamic entity. There are certain innate qualities, but it is constantly evolving also. Right? So therefore, I think when we look at Gita, when we see the definition of Varna, he says in the 4th chapter, we will see that very soon, Varna or the social classification is based on guna and karma. So the innate nature of the person and the profession that they pursue. So where the Swadharma naturally is what interests us, what is aligned to us, and has nothing to do with who we are born to. There's also, I think, Suresh ji had asked for this clarification on Swadharma. So he says, can we translate Swadharma as sense of purpose? Swadharma includes sense of purpose. Swadharma in a nutshell is the nature of an individual, the most natural thing. What is very, very, appropriate for the person without too much of exertion. Like how water finds its own level, the individual finds a very, very comfortable place in a certain activity, in certain profession, in certain group of people. So that is most natural to us, which means we don't have to go to great lengths to be who we are. We have to be who we are. It's the most straightforward thing. So he has said this might change. What might be feeling right in the youth will change in the senior years. That's where we have ashrama dharma, right? When somebody is a brahmachari or a student, they have certain restrictions. Whereas when somebody is a grihastha or a householder, they have other pressures, they have other freedoms also. Like this, at every stage of our life, our ideas will change. And like I said, Swadharma is something which is dynamic, and Swadharma should not be confused with Samanya Dharma. Samanya Dharma is always applicable. My Swadharma cannot be to be lazy. My Swadharma cannot be defined as to be cruel. My Swadharma cannot be defined as to have a propensity to steal. This is not Swadharma. These are maybe Swadoshas or whatever you can call some new word. These are all doshas. Swadharma is the natural inclination of the person. So in that sense of purpose is one of the parameters, definitely. So like Viktor Frankl talks about in Man's Search for Meaning, and so many people have spoken about it. Even Ken Robinson's book, The Element, he basically talks about Swadharma in that book. So what the idea is, when we are true to ourselves, when we are building on the innate abilities that we have, then the chances of us being fulfilled are higher, and the chances of us being valuable to society are also higher. So this is the vision of the ancient Indians. And there's one interesting point my friend Pratap had messaged me. In when I said yesterday that nobody wants to be the villain in their story. Everybody is a hero in their story. And that when that Arjuna asks, what is that compelling force? He says, Krishna says it is karma, it is desire. So even like he has given the example of the Godfather movie. In The Godfather, we may see as the audience Don Corleone as the hero because he's the protagonist of the thing. But when we see the larger society and the impact on the society, that a gangster like that will be very harmful. So he's adharmic. But within that framework of adharma, still there is dharma, right? So that larger framework of the being a mafia don is causing problem. But once we accept that framework of adharma inside that, when compared to Barzini or whatever, this guy is more honest. He doesn't want to promote drugs or whatever. So there is some dharmic strand in Don Corleone as opposed to the other Tartaglia and other families, right? So like that, when we see the bigger picture, we will see that this is also adharma only. And in their story, they don't want to be a villain. But when we see from the objective standpoint of dharma, we will know who is hero and who is the villain, who is dharmic, who is adharmic, right? And in Ramayana Mahabharata, that's exactly what we see. We see a large picture, and in that big framework, we can easily make out who is adhering to what standards and where we place them in the hierarchy. Then Srihari, my friend, had a very nice comment about, he spoke about Kama being, in the Purusharthas as well as the Arishad Varga. And he was referring to one of the lectures of Dr. Ganesh, where he has tried to show that Kama is the root for both the Purushartha and the Arishad Varga. Now, we saw in one of the earlier sessions how Kama is the root of Purushartha, right? So, because we have desire, because we have some requirement for enjoyment, we seek Artha, the means for fulfilling the Kama. And when we seek Artha, we try to seek it in a framework of Dharma so that it is sustainable. And when it is sustainable for a long time, the propensity, there is a tendency to attain moksha. So that is where Kama is the root of the Purushartha. In the case of the Arishad Varga, the 6 fundamental enemies of human beings, Kama is desire, lust, craving, which is again a starting point. When the desires are unfulfilled, then it leads to krodha, frustration, anger, irritation. So when it's not fulfilled. When the desires are fulfilled, then temporarily it reaches a stage of mada. I have got what I want. I'm a this thing. So you feel great about yourself. Yeah, I had this desire. I fulfilled it. See how everybody's below me. When that sustains, when your desires are fulfilled little more, then what happens is that you get attached to it. You get attachment. So moha develops. Then you have a craving for more. That is lobha, greed, avarice. And when a weak person gets desires and the desires are unfulfilled and the person is so weak, he can't even get angry, cannot even express the anger, that anger gets expressed in the form of matsarya, jealousy. Because a person who is strong and who is capable will not feel, the chances of feeling matsarya are low because my neighbor is doing well. Okay, let me also work hard and let me push my standards. I will do better than them. So that is a competitive spirit. But when the competitive spirit comes into a person who is weak and who is not able to compete, then it leads to matsarya. So this is the connectivity of the different Arishad Varga. I think it's a nice connection, easy for us to remember. I think I covered all the, more or less all the discussions mails got. One other thing was very nice. Pratap, sent to me before that. So yeah, so basically, like my co-author, Dr. Sri Krishna always says that, when we stay close to ourselves and our innate, abilities and things, then there is a chance of us being happy. So in a sense, we can say Swadharma is like follow your bliss, follow what brings you unbridled joy. So any joy that is stained with material pleasures is a very limited kind of a lower kind of joy. So when it is a fulfilling joy, then you follow that bliss. That's why we say bliss as a distinction, or ananda is something which is a fulfilling experience. So it is almost like following your bliss. That's Swadharma. Now, there is one interesting thing that my friend brought up. He sent me a mail with a long list of mottos of famous organizations in India, which have taken their Dhyaya Vakya from Bhagavad Gita. So, Swadharme Nidhanam Shreyaha, when that we were discussing that verse, he said, I got reminded because Swadharme Nidhanam Shreyaha is the motto of the Madras regiment. So, we will die fulfilling our Swadharma. It is better to die fulfilling our Swadharma rather than following the dharma of others. In this case, they have taken it to mean we will die in line of duty. So here they have interpreted Swadharma slightly differently, maybe different from what we are discussing. But even then, it's very nice that they have taken from Bhagavad Gita. Similarly, we have a couple of other, there are some 7 or 8 which he has sent me. And when we come to that particular verse in the Gita, I'll mention that. Or any of you can also mention it. So, Yuddhaya Krita Nishchaya, which is we saw in the 2nd chapter. Be determined now with the resolution, take up your arms and fight. Yuddhaya Krita Nishchaya is the Garhwal Rifles, has that as the motto. Then I believe Reserve Bank of India's training college has the motto Buddhau Sharanam Anvicha, which we saw again. Take refuge in wisdom, take refuge in buddhi. So like this, we will see there are some other places like Indian Air Force has a motto from Bhagavad Gita, and then also the Life Insurance Corporation of India has Bhagavad Gita. Yeah, and there's one more point that my uncle is mentioning, I think very valuable. When it comes to Swadharma, the ideal situation is where we do what we love. We enjoy what we pick up the kind of action that we really enjoy. The second best thing is to enjoy what we do, what we are given. Okay, we didn't do what we are enjoying. We didn't take up that ideal profession which pays really well, which gives a lot of holidays and allows you to do every work and has the best co-workers. We didn't get that. The next best thing is whatever situation we are, we learn to enjoy that. That is a practical way to deal with our life, right? So with a little longish Q&A, we'll move on to today's session. Let me see. Okay, can you see my screen? Yeah, so this is what we saw yesterday, right? Dhume navriyate vanhi. Just like how fire is enveloped by smoke, the mirror is covered by a layer of dust, and the embryo is encased in the womb. That is covered by this. So that meaning wisdom is covered by this meaning desire. So it's a very natural connection that you make. The desire is veiling the wisdom. Then he says, Avratam jnanametena jnanino nitya vairina Kama Rupena Kaunteya Dushpurena Analena Cha. So here Avratam Jnana Metena. So because of the next verse, we can assume that the previous one is talking about Jnana. So what is the point that he is making in this shloka? That the insatiable fire of desire, which is a perennial enemy, veils the wisdom of even the wise. So from this, we can, because of this jnani, the jnanam avritam we see here, therefore, that idam in the previous verse, tatha idam tena avritam, that idam is jnanam, tena is kamena, so by desire. So that we can understand from, when we see these verses in as like a group, it becomes quite clear. Right? So he says, Kaunteya, Jnaninaha, the wise people, Jnaninaha, Nitya Vairina. It is a perpetual enemy. It is a never-ending enemy. It's always an enemy. Nitya Vairina, Kama Rupena, in the form of desire, Kama Rupena, Dushpurena, it is something which cannot be filled. Dushpurena, it's insatiable. Analena, it's like fire. Cha etena jnanam avritam. This veils the wisdom, it engulfs the wisdom of even the wise people. So it is like a fire which is never ending. So however much fuel you add to the fire keeps growing bigger and bigger. So by adding fuel, you cannot fulfill the fire. This again exemplified beautifully in the story of Yayati. If you remember in the Mahabharata, he's a person whose desires are not fulfilled. He becomes an old man and still he has the desires of youth. And with the help of some, blessing from a rishi, he asks one of his children to grant him their youth, and he takes in exchange his son Puru becomes an old man, he becomes a young man, and he continues to enjoy the pleasures of the senses. And finally, he says, just like adding ghee or clarified butter into the fire, and the fire is only growing. Similarly, our desires, the fire of desire, the more you feed it, the more it grows. There is no end to it. And finally, he gives back the youth to Puru and ascends to Swarga and so on. Now, that's the nature of the desire. It's like a fire. And there's like a famous Subhashita, again, one of you should help me with the exact wordings. So he says, I think Agni Shesham, Rana Shesham, Shatru Shesham, Tathaivacha, something like that it goes. So whether it is a loan, whether it is an enemy, whether it is a fire, it has to be put out immediately. Otherwise, it will keep growing and it will consume you. Right? So, like that, this insatiable fire of desire is a perpetual enemy and it veils the wisdom of even the wise. So, avratam jnanametena.
Avratam jnanametena.
Jnanino nitya vairina.
Jnanino nitya vairina.
Kama rupena kaunteya.
Kama rupena kaunteya.
Dushpurenanalena cha.
Dushpurenanalena cha.
So, this is such a powerful enemy. Thank you. Then he says, Indriyani manobuddhir asyadishthana muchyate etair vimohyatyesha jnanam avritya dehinam. So, desire is seated in the indriyas, the sense organs, in the manas, which is like roughly the mind, and buddhi, which is the intellect. And through them, it deludes people by eclipsing their wisdom. So again, we see eclipsing the wisdom. So therefore, in the 38th shloka, we should take this idam as jnanam. Right? So indriyani, the sense organs, the nose, the eyes, the ears, the mouth, the skin, sense organs, mana, which is the mind, which is the internal organ, buddhi, the intellect, cha asya adhishthana muchyate. This is the adhishthana. Adhishthana is the foundation. It is the place of what do you say? It is seated there. It's a place of sitting. So that's where it is seated. That's where it is established. So desire is established in these sense organs, mind and intellect. Eshaha, this kamaha, we should understand this to be desire. Eshaha, etaihi jnanam. Through this, etaihi, by this, by what? By through the sense organs and mind and intellect. Through this jnanam avritam, it encompasses, it engulfs, it veils the or eclipses the wisdom. So jnanam avritya. So having eclipsed the wisdom of the people, dehinam vimohayati. So it kind of deludes the people. Dehin is some person who resides in the deha, the individual. Dehinam of the individuals. Vimohayati. It deludes the people through these organs of senses, mind and intellect. Desire works in these, using this as the foundation and deludes people. Pretty straightforward. Indriyani mano buddhihi
Indriyani mano buddhihi
asyadishthanamuchyate.
अस्याधिष्ठानमुच्यते
Asya adhishthanam. So asyadhisthanamuchyate. Etair vimohayatyesha.
एतैर्यमोह मोह यत्येष
Etair vimohayatyesha.
एतैर्यविमोहमत्येष
So it etaihi vimohayati esha. So etair vimohayatyesha jnanam avritya dehinam.
ज्ञानमावृत्य देहिनम्.
Now, because of these kind of sandhis and the conjuncts, it's always useful to read out anything in Sanskrit. It's very helpful when we just read it out aloud. I myself sometimes find it difficult. So when the moment I read it out loudly, couple of times, then it makes sense. And when we read, we can also break it up into some parts and then join it again. It becomes just easy for us to remember, because there is a lot of sandhi and samasa. When there is a samasa, there will be sandhi. So lot of sandhis which make it difficult. So always a good habit, anything you're reading, just read it loudly. That's a very, very simple trick for, when we are dealing with Sanskrit. Then he says, Tasmatvam indriyanyadav niyamya bharatarshabha papmanam prajahihyenam jnana vijnana nashanam. So this is a very, very beautiful verse again. He says, therefore, control the sense organs first and then shatter desire, which is the sinful destroyer of jnana and vijnana, of knowledge and experiential knowledge, of wisdom and reason. So Bharata Rishabha, which is again an epithet of Arjuna, the greatest of the Bharatas, or the bull among Bharatas, literally, but basically a reference to the one of the great scions of the Bharata dynasty. Tasmat, therefore, Tvam Adav, you first, what you should do, Adav Indriyani Niyamya, control the Indriyas, the sense organs, Indriyani Niyamya, Jnana Vijnana Nashanam. So, what is this? Is an adjective. Papmanam enam prajahi hi. So, papmanam, this sinful thing, which is what? Desire. What kind of a sinful thing is this? It is a jnana vijnana nashanam. It is a destroyer of jnana and vijnana, of knowledge and experiential knowledge, of wisdom and reasoning. So, in normal parlance in Kannada, in Hindi, and other languages, we use the word Vijnana to mean science. But here, Vijnana does not mean science. Vijnana means Vishesha Jnana, the knowledge that comes from experience. So, application of the knowledge learned over time and the experiential wisdom is called Vijnana. That is why, if you see, even in the Upanishads, when we have the Pancha Kosha, Annamaya Kosha to do with the level of food, Pranamaya at the level of breath and energy, Manonmaya at the level of mind, and then we have Vijnanamaya Kosha, which is at the level of experiential wisdom, and finally Anandamaya Kosha, which is at the level of bliss, ananda, happiness. So Vijnana is something which is an applied experiential wisdom. So nowadays in India, with the new NEP, right, the National Education Policy, there is a opening for something called a professor of practice, which means a person is very good in a particular field, but they are not having a PhD, or they don't have a higher degree in that. Their knowledge is mostly gained on the job. So till few years back, if a person like D.V. Gundappa, who was a 10th fail, had to get a job of a professor, he would be rejected. But today, in the new education policy, even D.V. Gundappa can become a professor of philosophy or journalism or whatever. So the professor of practice is a new thing that they have used. I suppose it's also prevalent in other countries. People are valued for their learning rather than for their educational qualification. So that is a jnana vijnana. So first he says, control your sense organs. Only then you can become ready to shatter desire, which is the sinful destroyer of wisdom and reason. Yeah, and there are so many small subtleties in these verses that we have to, realize it as we read it multiple times. Every word, the way they are using it, the kind of value that is there. So, papmanam, it is not just a destroyer of jnana and vijnana, it is also sinful, it is also evil. So, the adjectives that are used, they have a lot of meaning. So these, and it's, if we explain everything in the course of the discussion, I think it will become too heavy. So think of this always as like a primer to Bhagavad Gita, and then you can revisit again and again and get more nuances, and other details from it. Okay, so tasmat tvam indriyanyadau
Tasmat tvam indriyanadyo
niyamya bharatarishabha
Nyamya Bharatarshabha
papmanam prajahihyenam
Papmanam Prajahi Yenam
jnana vijnana nashanam.
Jnana Vijnana Nashanam.
Then he goes on to say, Indriyani paranya hur indriyebhyah param manaha manasastu parabuddhir yo buddhev paratastu saha. So, senses are superior to the body, mind is superior to the senses, intellect is superior to the mind, but this is superior to the intellect. So, what is this? It's a question. We will come to that. Just we will look at the Anvaya Krama, the prose order, then we will come to the meaning of this. What does he mean by this? Indriyani parani ahuho. Right? So the senses are superior to the bodies. The senses are said to be superior to the body. So again, that body is to be understood. Indriyani parani ahuhu. It is said that the senses are superior to the body. Indriyebhyah param manaha. The mind is said to be greater or superior to the indriyas, the sense organ. Manasaha para buddhihi. The buddhi or the intellect is said to be greater than the mind. Yaha buddhehe paratah saha asti. Now, what is this saha? This. Now, if we take the previous couple of shlokas, the subject matter is kama, desire. He says, insatiable fire of desire, a perennial enemy, and it wields the wisdom of the wise. Desire is seated in the intellect, in the sense organ, in the mind, and through them it deludes the person. Control the senses and shatter desire. So, desire is the point. So, one interpretation that some of the people do is that this saha means kama. Therefore, senses are superior to the body, the manas is superior to the indriya, the buddhi is superior to manas, and kama is superior to all this because it controls everything. This is one interpretation. The other interpretation is that when we see the following shloka, that there is a reference to Atman. So, we feel, Dr. Sri Krishna and me, when we were discussing this, in fact, when we had, even when we did the first edition in 2011, we kind of assumed it makes more sense to say Atman is superior to the intellect. The Atman is the highest thing, and which is there all over the text. When we worked on the 10th anniversary edition in 2021, then we saw a couple of other commentaries and realized that there are people who are giving this interpretation, and it is not totally wrong also, the other interpretation. So we thought we will capture both these things in our revised edition. So in the footnote, we are given both the interpretation, although it makes more logical sense for us to take saha as atma. The atman is greater than the intellect, the buddhi, which is greater than the manas, which is greater than the indriyas, which is greater than the deha. You can, either way, the point really being that we have to destroy desire. That's the tenor of these shlokas. So that's what we have to take away from this verse. So, Indriyani paranyahuhu.
Indriyani Paranyahuhu
Indriyebhya param manaha.
Indriyebhya Param Manaha
Manasastu para buddhihi
मनसस्तु परा बुद्धिः
yo buddhe paratastu saha.
यो बुद्धेः परस्तु परतस्तु सः.
Correct. Very good. And finally, evam buddhe param buddhva samstabhyatmanam atmana jahi shatrum mahabaho kama rupam durasadam. Therefore, knowing that this, that means Atman is superior to Buddhi, and subduing the lower self by the Atman, defeat that formidable foe appearing in the form of desire. Mahabaho, mighty armed. Arjuna, evam buddhe param buddhva. Evam buddhe param buddhva atmana atmanam samstabhya kama rupam durasadam shatrum jahi. So, evam buddhe, knowing that param buddhva, this is superior to buddhi, atmana atmanam samsthabhya, subduing the self by the self. What does it mean? Atmana atmanam samsthabhya. So what is subduing? What is subdued? We will come to that. So subduing the lower self by the higher self, subduing the lower self by the Atman, samstabhya, controlling, subduing, kama rupam, in the form of desire, durasadam shatrum, is a formidable foe which is appearing in the form of desire. So this is the real foe that is appearing in the form of desire. So you kill it. Now, when we look at verses like this, we can very clearly dismiss the claims of some people who say, oh, there was no Kurukshetra war. It is all happening in the mental plane. It is the fight between one's ego and one. If really Vyasa wanted to be metaphorical, why would he create this metaphor of Kurukshetra war and then again create a sub-metaphor here saying, enemy in the desire is the enemy, or the formidable foe in the form of desire. So it doesn't make sense to have a large metaphor inside that he will again create these kind of sub-metaphors, right? So we have to take the Kurukshetra war as a real war, and inside that, in using that as a pretext, Vyasa has, captured the discussion between Krishna. Krishna is using that as a pretext to talk to Arjuna, and Vyasa is using that as a pretext to educate people about the values of life. So, if Vyasa's intention was to give some good Bauddhic to people and give information to people about leading a good quality life, he would have had to write just one pamphlet, like 4 sides or 2 sides. He could have written all 1, 2, 3, 4 best qualities of life. Okay, and Vyasa, if there is one beautiful verse which is ascribed to him. He says, Shlokardhena pravakshami yaduktam grantha kotibihi paropakaraya punyaya papaya parapidanam. So I will tell you what has been said in a million books in half a verse. Helping others is good, harming others is bad. So he has given that sukta also, very simple. If you don't need any of these things, this is just this simple sukta he has given. So why should he create all this story and everything to tell if the only objective is to give some spiritual education? That's not the only object. We also get spiritual education from Mahabharata. The whole idea is at one level, it's capturing the history and capturing the heritage of our country in a manner that is so beautiful and rich with imagery and poetic expression and ideas. It is entertaining, it is enriching, it is giving us knowledge about our ancestors, and it is also educating us about specific details of spirituality, about Dharma Shastra, about governance, about so many aspects, right? So therefore, I think this is just a simple example of a verse which shows us that this kind of metaphorical thing of Duryodhana being the ego and Karna being the thing, all this kind of thing is probably not a great way to look at the epic, in my opinion. So let's look at this verse once again, and then depending on the time, we will review the 3rd chapter. So, evam buddhe param buddhva.
एवं बुद्धेः परं बुद्ध्वा
Samsthabhyatmanam atmana
संस्थभ्यात्मना Matmana.
So samstabhya atmanam atmana. So the three samstabhyatmanam atmana.
Sansthabhyatmana Matmana.
Jahi shatrum mahabaho
Jahi Shatrum Mahabaho
kama rupam durasadam.
Kamarupam Durasadam.
So this idea of what is this samstabhya atmanam atmana. So we see this reference of the lower self being subdued by the higher self. So I had mentioned to you in when we looked at this raga dvesha viyuktaistu vishayan indriyais charan atma vashyair vidheyatma. We saw this in the prasadam adhigachati. We saw this in the second chapter, right? So we have multiple references. Even in the sixth chapter, we will see this idea of atma being the self, subduing the self. Here, the distinction being the higher self, the atma, subduing the lower self, which means what? When we have this idea, when we say, for example, I'll give you a simple example. We say there's something called conscience. We all have heard of this word conscience. He's a very conscientious person. What do you mean by conscience? A person with conscience will do the right thing whether somebody is watching or not. A person, if I told a child, when I am not there, don't take a chocolate from this box. You are going to be studying, you don't take a chocolate from this box. So even though there is no CCTV camera, even though there is no parental or somebody looking around, a conscientious person will say, I have been told that I should not take this. This is right for me. I should not do this and focus on my studies. A person without a conscience will not have this internal guiding mechanism, right? So the person who is controlling the thoughts is also me. The person whose thoughts are being controlled is also me. I am the one who's saying, don't eat the chocolate because your mother has told you should not eat. You should study right now. That is me. And I am the one who is craving to eat the chocolate, who is being controlled. So you think of it like almost there are two people inside you. One is telling that, hey, go, you do this. Other one is saying, don't do this. Almost, if you remember in some of the Tom and Jerry cartoons, there'll be this good Tom and evil Tom, or good Jerry and evil Jerry will come out. And the good one will say, you go do this. The bad one will say, it is just a manifestation of how our mind works. So this lower self, which is having more of the baser instincts, is subdued by the higher self, which has a nobler values. So that is what he's trying to say. Knowing that the intellect is, the Atma is superior to the intellect as well, subdue the lower self by the higher self and defeat this enemy which appears in the form of desire. It's a formidable enemy. You defeat that and go forward. So what started off as this thing of go and fight in a battle, he has also brought it at the very purely philosophical level of internal correction mechanism. So if he defeats the desire, enemy of desire within, then he can actually go and defeat the physical enemy which is standing in front of him. Because of this attachment and desire inside him, he's not able to fight the physical enemy, right? So thank you, Vandanaji, for reciting. So do we have time to look at the third chapter in a little bit of detail? About 15 minutes. Maybe I'll just start off today and then resume discuss in the next session. We'll try to finish wrapping up the discussion of the third chapter. Okay, so there's a question from Annaji. In a 340, why is Buddhi considered to be breeding ground for desire? Now, very good question. I think it's also pertinent to take up here. Let's see this verse. Indriyani manobuddhir asyadhishthanam uchyate. Now, desire is something which is abstract entity. It has to operate somewhere. It has to work through some mechanism. When we say we desire something, what is the where is the starting point of the desire? Now, I want to, let us say, have an ice cream. The starting point of desire is a sense fulfillment for my tongue, and that is also triggered by my mind, which says, okay, that will be very nice because that experience of having had ice cream in the past is very, very nice. And I had a good experience. I want to repeat that experience. And it operates at this level. And so therefore we go and drive down to the ice cream parlor and get a thing, and we are fulfilled. Now, sometimes the desire might be, I want to be the first in my class. I want to excel. I want to do this. Then you say, oh, I have to work hard. I have to do this. So that desire drives you to work hard and do whatever thing. Now, that is operating more at the level of the mind and the intellect. So like this, desires operate at these levels, right? It needs a certain place to operate. Now, if somebody is switched off their buddhi, switched off their manas, switched off their indriya, then can desire operate? That we know when we are in deep sleep. When we are in deep sleep, there is no indriya, there is no manas, there is no buddhi. So there is no desire. Their desire cannot operate there. So we have a very handy reference point for us when we come to deep sleep. That is why the school of Vedanta, especially Advaita Vedanta school, they studied this very deeply because it is a handy tool available for us where we have ourselves experienced the state of no manas, no buddhi, no indriya, no ahankara. We experience this every day. So when we use that as a reference point, that becomes very useful. So even in the Upanishads and all this thing, it's there. So therefore, the desire needs some place to operate, and the place of operation, the foundation is this Indriya, Manas, and Buddhi. So that's what he's trying to say in this shloka. There's another comment in the chat. Okay, there is a question about free will. I think it's a little complicated topic. We can take it up, at a later point in time when we review Bhagavad Gita. But to just in a quick response, of course there is free will. When we say Swadharma, it means what we have to choose, right? What is aligned to our nature. In the 18th chapter, when he says, think and reflect deeply on all whatever I've told you, and yathechasi tatha kuru, do as it is right for you. There is an element of free will, but it is not without certain boundaries. So there is free will. At the same time, there is also the element when he says in the 18th chapter again, the factors that determine the outcome. Just because you have free will doesn't mean whatever you desire will happen. So there is an element of chance. There is the daiva, the unknown. Whether you call it destiny, whether you call it act of God, or whether you call it unknown forces, whatever it may be, from our own experience, we know that there are things beyond our control. The moment we know that they are beyond our control, that means there is a limitation to free will. So it's not like a perfect free will. At the same time, there is free will. There is opportunity to explore oneself. So I think it is like it has to be taken in certain kind of moderation. And then we will discuss this later on. And if I, for whatever reason, forget, please bring it up once again. Who's the person who has raised this thing? Venkat Raji. So whenever, if I forget about this, we will bring it up. We will definitely discuss in little greater detail. Okay, so I thought I will finish the third chapter much earlier today, but in any case, we can discuss a little bit about the third chapter and resume this when we meet on Sunday evening in the US time and Monday morning India time. So in the Jivana Dharma Yoga of D.V. Gundappa, he usually starts off by giving a summary of that chapter with the broad topics. So I've taken it from that. So there are 6 broad topics in the third chapter, which are the unavoidability of karma. You remember we saw in the beginning of the third chapter, there are some things that we just cannot avoid. Simple maintenance of the body also requires karma. We cannot avoid karma. We have to do karma even in order to just survive. Forget about living a good life and being happy and doing other things. Just for us to sustain ourselves, we have to do karma. So it is unavoidable. Then he spoke about the cooperation amongst all beings. Prajapati, in the past, long ago, he created all the creatures with the spirit of yajna, and he said humans and devas should mutually nourish each other. They should nourish one another, and this mutual nourishment will lead to greater good. And if somebody does not share, then he's almost like a thief. So he talks about that until the 16th or something verse. Then he talks about working without attachment. So karma yoga basically is doing work without being bothered too much about the result. So karma without attachment. Then there's a distinction between the karma of the wise and the karma of the ignorant. So, and how the person who works for personal benefit is ignorant, a person who works for larger welfare is wise, and the wise people should not put down ignorant people but should inspire them. Then we saw the relationship between jnana and karma, in a way, actually answering, Arjuna's question. And finally, the necessity of performing one's own dharma and also overcoming desire, overcoming kama. This is the last part. So we can even make it into 7 parts. One is the necessity to perform one's own dharma and the importance or the mechanism to overcome kama. Right? So this is roughly the scope of the 3rd chapter. If you remember, Krishna explained in detail several aspects in the 2nd chapter. Following that, immediately Arjuna asks him, these questions. So what comes just before this 3rd chapter? The Sthita Prajna Lakshana, right? So in great detail from the 55th shloka of the 2nd chapter till the 72nd, the end of the 2nd chapter, Krishna has discussed in great detail about all the characteristics of a wise person. And immediately Arjuna asked this question. Now, I think what Arjuna would have felt, and maybe what we also feel if you just remember the Sthita Prajna Lakshana, somehow we feel that this person is in some serene forest wearing some ochre robes and meditating, right? Because he's like, just as the tortoise withdraws all the limbs, he withdraws all the sense organs. He is, whatever is night for the people, common people, is daytime for him. Whatever is, so what the cravings and desires, what normal people have, he is very far away from that. The realized truth, what is very far away for people, is very close to him. His eyes are open to that, and this is the state Brahmi Sthiti, and the boat which is going in the water, it's not the wind carries away from its chartered course, so the sense organs carry this away, but their sense organs are very firm, and so on. The description of that Sthita Prajna Lakshana gives a feeling that this person is in a faraway place and in a hut and living a simple life and so on, right? So Arjuna also must have been confused that this person is far away from the arena of daily life. And it's definitely a very romantic ideal, right? To be away from people, be peaceful amidst nature. Because especially when we are in the middle of work and we are middle of, impending, the project is about to begin, we have some deadline, that is exactly the time we think of vacation. That's when the vacation seems so alluring. Just when we want to start off working and we are so much of thing on the plate. If you look at the to-do list for today, there are 23 things to be done. Already it is 9 o'clock. And then there is some phone call from the home. That's exactly when you think, I wish I was in some, beautiful place with a lot of trees and birds, and it would be so nice. So naturally, Arjuna, in the impending battle, he is very attracted by this Sthita Prajna. He wants to lead a life of a Sthita Prajna who is in that forest and, with all the natural thing and very meditating all the time, having some simple food. All this looks alluring, right? We have also experienced. You go to some retirement community, you go to some place, let's spend 3 days, you'll get bored. It looks very nice in the middle of all the work, you want to go away. But to go and be with nature, where there is no internet connection, no Wi-Fi, there is the water doesn't come in the tap. For every time you want to drink water, you have to go to the lake and get one pot of water and drink it, heat it and drink it and all this thing. 3 days, you'll say, okay, I want to get back to my home, right? So as far as the externals of the Sthita Prajna are concerned, Arjuna was very attracted. That's why he says, you are confusing me. You are saying all these excellent things. Sthita Prajna sounds very excellent to me. Very nice. Why are you then asking me to fight? It's almost like a contrast. So then Krishna says that, the way to attain Brahmi Sthiti is the true knowledge. The true knowledge of the self is attaining Brahmi Sthiti, right? Arjuna is like, okay, yes, that is Brahmi Sthiti. I think it's very good. If Buddhi Yoga and Sankhya Yoga itself can grant me this state, then why should I do Karma Yoga? Why should I go and fight? Why can't I just follow this path? Why this Dharma, Karma, Yuddha, all these things are required? So then Krishna gives an explanation about the nature of karma. So here we have to get into the detail of karma. But before that, we'll just quickly have a look at the reason for Arjuna's doubt. So one is, like I said, he might have been allured by this idea of Sthita Prajna. Instead of going and fighting anything, definitely, even a Vipassana meditation camp, 10 days where you're not allowed to speak, you're not allowed to take your phone, even that looks as an exciting option when you have got impending project deadline. But when you go there, you realize how hard it is. So Krishna has told in the second chapter, Yuddhaya Yujasva, engage in the battle, be part of it, keeping dharma in mind. Karmani eva adhikarahate, only you can control only your actions. You can only, so kuru karmani, you do your work, perform your duty. Then on the other side, he says, avaram karma, the karma is inferior to jnana. Then buddhau sharanam anvicha, so find refuge in buddhi, resort to your intellect. Then yoga yujasva, be engaged in yoga. So the big question is, you are saying yuddhaya yujasva, you are also saying yogaya yujasva, which is correct? Tell me for sure. That is where the question arises in Arjuna. So because Krishna's instructions seemed as if they are opposites. In one moment you're saying this, another moment you're saying this. Which of the two should I pursue? Tell me for sure. That is when Krishna says that jnana and karma are not opposites. They are complementary to each other. So initially, karma is the means to jnana. Once jnana is attained, karma becomes the result of jnana. And whether you like it or not, karma is always there. It is inevitable. The jiva cannot escape this, the stain of karma by becoming lazy. So just assuming you're wearing that costume of a sannyasi does not make you a sannyasi. Otherwise, all the actors who have acted as Buddha would have attained enlightenment. No, so many people would have. In fact, in those days, there used to be a joke with the natak companies or the theater companies, which will put on different dramas. There will be people who are doing the role of Rama, Krishna, Sita, Duryodhana, all these people, right? So they are all people from all walks of life, and they are individually, they have their own vices and their virtues. When they are on stage, they are Rama and Krishna and this thing. But when they come to the side wings, they may be having a cigarette or a bidi, or they may be having some coffee, or they may be eating bonda or something. So on the stage, they're Rama and Krishna and Duryodhana and Shakuni and all this thing. But off the stage, they are Ramappa, Krishnappa, whatever these guys, they are individual personalities, right? So therefore, just wearing the garb of a monk doesn't lead anywhere. That is only hypocrisy. So therefore, the emphasis is controlling the jnanendriya, not the karmendriya. Karmendriya should be put to work. Jnanendriya should be stilled, trying to settle the sense organs down, reduce the sense organ by disconnecting from the sensates as much as possible, but put the karmendriya to work, hands and legs and mouth and your genitals and anus. These are the 5 karmendriyas. Put them to work, but sense organs, keep it disconnected as much as possible. If you do the other way around, it is the worst case scenario, right? Where you are lazy, you are not being useful to anybody, and also you are full of desires and unfulfilled dreams. At least if you have both on, that means you are craving for something, but you're also working hard to fulfill that craving, at least something will come out of it. Or if you are really lazy, you also switched off your sense organs, that's a different case. But here, the worst case scenario is you have mentally brooding over all sorts of desires, but physically you are lazy. So that's the worst combination Krishna talks about in the early verses of the 3rd chapter. We'll continue with the roundup of the 3rd chapter in the next session. Then we will proceed to the 4th chapter. So any questions? Again, I'm always grateful for very good feedback and questions coming from people. So please feel free to share your any questions, any doubts, or any comments in case you feel that there are certain things that can be added on. Also, like today, what Dr. Sri Krishna said, what Pratap said, so many things I have also added on to what I have said. So it is useful for everybody. So if you take little effort to send a mail and think, it is helping everybody. So thank you so much. Om Tat Sat. And have a nice weekend ahead.
Thank you
you.
so much.
Thank you.